Hello and welcome to Women's Crick Zone specials. It's International Women's Day, and we've had quite an eventful day so far, beginning with the release of the fourth issue of the Women's Crick Zone magazine, and now a series of special panel discussions that will be aired through the course of March. On this panel, we're in conversation with three very accomplished women, and we're going to talk about what it's like being a female sports journalist in India, the challenges they faced, the issues that women in sport continue to face, and how the space has changed over the years. So, without further ado, let me introduce our panelists, Sharda Ugra, Karanya Keshav, and Suprita Das. Now, Sharda Ugra has been a sports journalist for over 3 decades. She started her career with Mumbai tabloid Midday before working with national daily The Hindu, India Today magazine, ESPN Cricinfo, and ESPN India. She worked with former New Zealand captain John Wright and Indian cricketer Yuvraj Singh on their memoirs around Indian cricket. She was a fellow of the Australia India Institute, University of Melbourne in 2013. Karanya Keshav is co-author of The Fire Burns Blue, A History of Women's Cricket in India. After stints with The Hindu, Wisden, and the ICC, she is now a freelance cricket writer and digital sports consultant. Along with the Sports Law and Policy Center in Bangalore, and columnist and YouTuber Snehal Pradhan, she's aiming to put together a framework to support women's cricket over the next decade as part of the Equal Hue project. And finally, Suprita Das worked as a sports correspondent and anchor with NDTV for a decade, during which she covered multiple national and international events. Covering 2 Olympic Games remain her most favorite assignments. She's authored 2 books, Shadow Fighter, a biography of boxer Sarita Devi, and Free Hit, the story of women's cricket in India, which recently won a national award. Suprita currently works with the Delhi Capitals IPL franchise, where she works on communication and content. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for your time. It's a privilege to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us, and congratulations on the magazine again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so without kind of running around the bush, I'm going to start with you, Sharda. You made your way into sports journalism in the early 90s. 2 questions here. First, how did it happen? Was it a case of I like sports, I'm good at writing, so this is what I want to do? And 2, you kind of crashed a men's club. So, how did people around you take that?
I love sports. I loved writing. First of all, like the magazine, full marks. I've forgotten there's an expression you have to use, which is like a millennial thing about some full points or whatever. But I've forgotten it. But that's what I mean. Like superb, well done. A long time coming. As you can see, the women's cricket team has also finally got some attention and a series going for it. Coming back to my story, I was a huge fan of sports. I was a very crappy, average athlete myself, useless at school. But I played a lot with boys as well in the sort of the housing complex where I grew up. I knew I wanted to write. I knew I wanted to do something with books. I would have loved to have been in theory in my head when I was around 16 or 17. I said, oh, it'd be great to be a sports journalist, but it's not going to happen. And when I was in college, there were a couple of friends of mine, a friend of mine called Ramola Talwar. She now she's a journalist still. She works for the National in Dubai. She said, let's go and interview Imran Khan. They are coming. It is 1987. They are coming here for a series. Let's do this. She was a massive Imran fan. We were sort of Imran fans of varying degrees, but she was like the top. Me and another friend of ours, Shazia Khan. We said, okay, let's. And as it turned out, it was easier than you would imagine. This was 1987. So we got this thing going. And once that whole exercise was done, literally you called them on the phone, you left a message in the hotel lobby with the security guys saying, who are these 3? Obviously children, girls were there. And once that happened, it got published, and then sort of we kind of hit on a roll and said, let's do a lot more of these, because there was a World Cup was coming, and you had the 87 World Cup, and you had people passing through Bombay. I grew up in Bombay, and so we got these things published. And I did enter, I thought I would do something in journalism because it was about words. And I said, that's the only thing I could do. I said, no, let's not do advertising. By the way, humanities students in the 1980s had very few options. You had advertising or journalism or study more. Or library science was my other sort of career choice. So me and Ramola and another boy, we went through the Indian Express sort of recruitment for trainees and so on. We all made it. The three of us made it to the final 7. They made the final 2, and I didn't get that. I couldn't intern for them. They were really crushed and unhappy, and it's really spooky. Ramola's mother called up and said, please tell Sharda Midday has applied for a sports reporter's job. She should go and apply. And Midday has never applied after that or before that. I don't remember seeing any ad saying sports reporter is needed. Never anywhere. So I went and I applied. Of course, I had all my interviews with me, as in taken with my friends, but my byline was there. I knew how to type. I'd studied computers. And it started from literally being pushed in from something that was a completely, no, I didn't know anything about journalism. I didn't know anything about the job. All I'd done was interviews, I hadn't covered a match. I hadn't done anything. I mean, I love sports. So I read about it. I watched it. I was obsessive. But I had no training in journalism whatsoever. And all that I had was a bachelor's degree in history. So it was so it made no sense. But at the same time, because Midday at that time was a very small, a very young organization, Khalid Ansari was the boss, but Tariq Ansari was his elder son, had taken over, and he was like this young, energetic. I don't know what happened. They just said, okay, can you do this? Will you be able to report something for us? When can you join? This looks very nice. Why are there 3 of you? When can you join? So I said, I'm going to Nagpur for Diwali vacation. They said, oh, there's a Nehru Trophy match at Nagpur. Why don't you go and cover that for us? Okay. But I don't know how to do it. They said, no, we'll give you a telex card that belongs to one of our colleagues. And you go to the telex office and you file your copy and you send it back. This is Pakistan versus England, a semi-final. So I said, okay. And it worked like that I walked into the stadium and I said, I've come from Midday. I think I had a letter, I don't know, but I had this telex card. I said, I've come from Midday. I need accreditation. I want to cover the match. So there was this very old gentleman there, like there are cricket officials who sit around in offices and they've sort of run the thing informally. I think he was a bank official. I've forgotten his name, but he comes to my mind. I always have thanked him greatly. He said, yeah, okay, fine. What is your name? Okay, fine. Come tomorrow, this is the media pass he gave me. And I went back the next day. I'm sure I had a letter from Midday sort of endorsing who I was. And I filed this copy and then I got the job. And I haven't stopped since then. And it was just completely an absolute thing from, I don't know, that advertisement in the paper, this match I had to go to. So this was like my test. The match was like my test. So I must have filed a reasonably coherent, cogent copy. And they said, fine, come back and you can join us. And that's how it went. And the good part, your second question, you said, this was a male club. Of course, completely, full of them, everywhere. But like with the official at the Nagpur ground, with officials, scorers, telex operators, I had no problem as such. One of my theories is that because I'm slightly tall, above average height for an Indian woman, I don't look I don't need I'm not Nazuk and I'm not babe. And so, I don't know. This is a theory of mine. I don't know how these things work. So they just said, okay, you're doing this. So you come and do it. It's fine. We'll do your work for you. We'll help you. And they were helpful. I mean, I have to say this, all the officials at that time, they were very, very helpful. They would just say, oh, woman has come now. What do we do about toilet and all that? But they were by and large accepting because you were working for a city paper, your byline came the next day in whatever you'd written. And so they saw that your work was happening. You hadn't just come there to be groupie or take autographs or whatever, and it worked. And the club it was, again, there were sort of layers in the club as well. There were really, really older. There was a gentleman called Cecil Hendricks. He was too much. He was like this very old. He used to report on racing and hockey and so on, but much, much senior, sort of around older than my age at this point. He met me at a press conference where I used to be terrified and stand in a corner and was very quiet. I never said anything. And he said, aren't you having a drink? I said, no, Mr. Hendricks, I don't drink. And said, what kind of a journalist are you? So there was this, this great bonhomie. He had that very relaxed kind of way about him. There's Ayaz also was superb. Ayaz Menon was great. Natarajan from the Express was there. So they were all kind of understanding. There were some guys who just wouldn't talk to you. They would pretend you're not there. Like you could die there on the spot and they would have said, no bodies around, no body to be found kind of thing. So that was the backlash or whatever you said. That was like the response you got was this wall of complete silence. That, we don't care who you are. Why are you coming here? Why don't you go and die? I mean, this why don't you go and die is my theory, of course. I'm sure they never had neat thoughts. But it was literally like complete silence. And I know there were some people I have not spoken to ever as a journalist in my entire 30 years. Like not even a hello, good morning, how are you kind of a conversation. There are some with whom I've exchanged very, very few sentences. So there was this, and then there was younger people like me of my age, younger guys who were like, oh God, the boss is on my case. I have to file story in time. So you're all in that same kind of thing. So we became friends. And that's how it worked pretty much. And even with the cricketers, for a while, there was like one or two people who would say something silly. But by and large, they were just okay because they saw that this person is sitting in the press box from 9 o'clock in the morning. I remember Sanjay Manjrekar said something. There was this event in Surat at, it is called the Lalbhai Contractor Stadium now, which is at the moment there. It was basically a construction site. So we were sitting amongst piles of these, sariyas and concrete blocks and bags of cement, and they had put table and chair, and that was the press box. And so the players saw you turning up at 9 o'clock in the morning with your pen and your paper and your recorder or whatever else you had and all that. And it just sort of went from there. That's how it went. So here I am now, after 30 years doing the same thing, being a nuisance here.
Karunya was kind of different for you. You did study journalism. You have reported on various beats. How did you stumble into sports journalism, particularly cricket? And, why did you stick around?
Yeah, mine was completely by chance. I love sports. A lot of my best relationships are built around sports. I met my husband because of that. My closest friends are because, we enjoy talking sports. And I did study sports as well. I did an elective in university and did nothing with it. Because I think, as Sharda said, these aren't jobs that are advertised very much. So when I started looking for jobs, I found a job in a newspaper, went for it. Whenever there was a story about sports, I very happily did it. The move to sports, to Wisden, happened purely by chance. And it maybe happened because I wasn't so into the sports ecosystem at that point, because they were trying to look for someone who could maybe simplify a very the nerdy what cricket journalism is perceived as, even though it's not always like that. They wanted someone to simplify that for maybe a wider audience. So I actually got into it because I wanted to work with really great writers rather than wanting to work with cricket. I was very intimidated in the early days. I was very afraid to talk cricket with a lot of my colleagues because, they knew things like, 1966, this is what happened. This is what this person scored. He got out on the second ball with this delivery. And I forget matches 2 months later very often. So I really got into it for, the rest of things around cricket. And I think that's why I've stuck there as well, because you realize that sport isn't only about the matches or what is happening in a field, but there's just so much that you can take from sports to the rest of your life, which is what interests me.
And Suprita, of course, your first foray into journalism was TV. So can you tell us about those initial experiences being a female TV journalist, and considering you did cover a lot of Olympic sports as well, what was the attitude of those people around you, especially because those sports are not as established or popular as cricket?
Okay. Firstly, it was fascinating to hear both Sharda and Karunya's stories, especially when Sharda mentioned telex and typewriters and all. That's something that we never had, so it was quite nice to hear that. Okay. I am a fully accidental sports journalist. So when I was, finishing like my high school and college, television in India was sort of, a lot of channels were being launched, and I found this medium quite interesting. I liked watching TV news. I liked how you could just sit in front of the TV at 9 o'clock and everything that's happening that day in the world, you could understand and get a sense of it in 30 minutes. So I liked television, and luckily there were courses that were being introduced back then in Calcutta University, which is where I'm from. So I studied, and then I went on to do a journalism course as well, where I sort of specialized in electronic media. And then I managed to bag an internship with NDTV at that time, and nothing to do with sports. I was literally hop, skip, jumping from one department to the other. And one such week, I was working with a lifestyle producer, and I was asked to research on scented candles. So there was this episode, and I was researching on aromatherapy, and I was very angry. I was like, this is not why I went to journalism school. I must do something. Certainly not research about scented candles. So there was a lot of live sport happening at that time. The French Open was going on. The Indian team was touring West Indies. There was a major football tournament, that sort of stuff happening. So I just went to my trainer and I said, ma'am, I really enjoy sports. And I've played rubbish level of sports. I cannot play anything to save my life, but I really enjoyed watching and reading a lot about sports. 1996, I would say, was like a year which has sort of left a mark. It was the first time I went to a cricket ground. I went for the inauguration of the 96 World Cup at the Eden Gardens. And it was also the year when Leander Paes won his Olympic bronze medal. And I will always remember, that middle page spread in the Sports Star, which had his photo holding up his bronze medal. So that year sort of left an impression on me. So back to NDTV internship days, and I told my trainer, ma'am, I really like sports. There's a lot of live action happening right now. If you think I could complete the rest of my internship at the sports desk, maybe I would be able to learn and pick up skills a little more in the little time that I have at the organization. She agreed readily. And that's where it started. I mean, I did a lot of night shifts because this test series was happening in the West Indies. So all the action was at night, and I had to log every single ball of that test match. Okay, what is happening, dot ball, has anyone said anything, has the commentator said anything interesting, anything controversial. So it was a painful experience, but it was a learning experience also, because I think it was only during that time when I had watched every single frame of a test match. It was not always enjoyable, like I said, but it was a learning experience. And then 2 months later, my internship got converted into a job. It was my first job, which I did for 10 years. A lot of people are shocked when I tell them. I'm like, there are other people also who do the same job all their lives. But of course, I think television's experience was a lot different from, the print experiences that Sharda and Karunya shared. I feel because as a medium, two things. One is, as a medium, I think we were always seen as the bunch of people who were more out there. If you had to, chase a story, or if you needed a sound bite for a story, then you would reach that place or that person from whom you needed that story, because there was that sense of immediacy and urgency with television news, which now is there with digital news, of course, that, okay, my bulletin is at 6 o'clock. I need to put together a 2-minute story, and I really need 30 seconds of an official saying that, for so-and-so reason, so-and-so is not happening, but I need to get that on camera. I can't put a graphic or something. So whatever it is, I will go and hunt down that official with my mic and tell him, sir, aap mujhe camera pe bata dijiye what had happened, because I needed the sense of me, which was amazing. It was super exciting. The other thing, I think, being a girl in the television news, so I worked in an organization where our core editorial was women, and most of my mentors, my editors, the senior reporters on the desk, they were all women. So I never felt like I was out of place, even when I went out on the field, or if I was in the studio reporting something like from the office, from the studios, I never felt out of place. Sure, there were assignments where you would find people sort of, maybe thinking like, okay, what is she doing here? There were also, I know at the start of my career, there are people who had these notions that women don't understand sports, right? Like I've heard people while doing a really long stakeout at a some hockey related news, I think, some KPS Gill related story one was covering, and was waiting outside his residence for a really long time. And one always used to find the print guys in one group and the TV guys who were considered very non-important, because, you know, what do TV guys know? They're all like floozy people in another group. And I totally remember people saying, Acha, this one's a sport. Oh, this is the new one from NDTV. Look at her. I mean, how will she know anything? There are people who have this perception. Do you know what an LBW in cricket is? You know, do you know what an offside is in football? So this sort of chitter chatter one always got to hear. But I suppose you go with the attitude that, listen, I'm here for my story. I've come to cover this press conference, or I need a soundbite of this lady or this gentleman. I will do my job and I'll file my story.
Anandya, let me just jump in here. You know, the presence of women, the TV reporters particularly, when they started coming in. So I joined in 89, right? And you started seeing women sports reporters coming in around, say, 90-ish, kind of 90, 91, 92. Their numbers became greater. But when the TV girls came, it was the complete sort of vibe changed around it. Because these girls didn't give a shit about what all these guys thought about them. I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was Rika, Suprita, I'm not sure. I remember there was somebody, and it was a girl. She was standing at, the Australian team had arrived in some airport. I was still doing airport stories at that time, so it must be a long time ago. And that girl, literally, she just banged on the window of the bus. And she held out her mic, and I think there was Steve or somebody there. Might have been 2001. And this thing opening, and he gave her this bite that she wanted. I said, my God, this is full sass. Because we used to spend our time being quiet. I didn't ask a question in a press conference for about 4.5 years. I was like, chup. So people who see me now said, Are, what happened to you? You used to be so quiet, you know. And but the TV girls, they just came in there and they just completely changed the equation of, they didn't care what all those old sports journalists, those guys thought of them. They had to do their story. They had to get their bite. They just went and did their thing and they went away. So they were great in a way. It was like a very liberating thing. They wore what they want. All the time when we used to like try and dress down, you know, try and be as invisible like furniture and all. The TV girls didn't care. They had to be on camera. They had to look presentable. It was fantastic. Whatever TV has become now is, of course, another different element, news television. But at that time, in the early 2000s, it was fabulous to see all of them then. Suddenly our numbers just increased. You know, we could all complain about toilets and this and that and the other and how terrible these guys were behaving. Whatever, you know, you could do all that. It was too much fun.
Yeah, and now we're obviously seeing a lot more female journalists covering sport, but you know, there seems to be a tendency, or at least I've experienced it, that there seems to be a tendency to kind of blood young cub reporters in women's events because they're seen as a step down. And even as a player with umpires, we see, you know, umpires are first kind of put into women's cricket and only then they go to under 16 boys or under 19 boys. And so is that attitude changing now, or is that something that, you know, still happens? Whoever wants to take that, Karunya maybe?
Yeah, I suppose it does happen to an extent. I started doing a lot of reporting because on women's cricket because no one else wanted to do it. But I don't think that's a bad thing actually, because I find a lot of men's sport really difficult to cover now because of various issues of access and all those things that Sharda was talking about, just being able to go up to people and just talk to them. Things that Suprita was saying, you know, just go sit in an association and just, you know, find your story. That sort of space also is very limited now, especially as things are moving digital, because, you know, there are these different, you have these quotas saying, okay, we have to get 20 stories up today, we have to get 40 stories up today, because otherwise no one's going to click on our website. So just go through someone's tweets and write some few stories. So I think when there are these other events, the smaller events that happen, whether they're domestic games or women's games, I don't think it's a bad thing, because it does allow a lot of these younger reporters just a space to go and see people, to talk to people, to just get out of cubicles, because I think maybe a lot of digital journalism is happening in cubicles right now, which is not a good thing. I think there has been a change though in how a lot of the senior people do see women's events. There is an understanding that in terms of visibility, they can add to their visibility if they do women's events as well. This I'm talking only about reporters. So umpires, I think it may be a slightly different process. But for the senior reporters, definitely, I've seen people who maybe 5 years ago refused to cover the women's games of a double header. But now, realize that there is a value to this. There are stories that just, if you look for them and you find them.
I also think the attitude about women's sport has also had to shift, because our biggest performers outside cricket particularly happen to be women, like you saw at the Rio Olympics, and figures like Mary Kom, and so that has changed considerably.
Okay, so with all the success that we've kind of seen across sporting codes, and Sukrita, you mentioned this, many of those were visible on TV, whether it's, Saina Nehwal, Sania Mirza, the women's cricket team, the women's hockey team. Do you kind of see a visible change in the attitude towards women's sport, both in the media and as an audience? Do you sense a shift in the tone of the reporting from maybe token coverage to actual in-depth analysis, or is that something we're still striving for?
See, I think, women athletes of this country have given us so much success in the last 10 years or so. You don't have an option but to, focus on them and focus on them real hard, because they are getting you the medals, right? From the biggest tournaments. I mean, when I started reporting, I really could not think that we could have like a badminton singles world champion from this country. I mean, it's amazing. So you really don't have an option but to focus and keep focusing on them and keep doing. But I feel like I don't report any longer. If people request me to write, I do write, because that's something I enjoy. But I feel like there is very little in-depth reporting that is done. You probably just cover that athlete when he or she is in the middle of a tournament, and we tend to, whenever they're doing well, let's say Saina is in a Super Series semi-final or Sindhu is in another final, you will see that coverage. I feel that that in-depth reporting doesn't happen. It could be because of two reasons. I think one I feel, and I can certainly speak on behalf of television, I know that the crews have become smaller. The industry is not in great shape. When I started out, there were a lot of my reporting assignments, I traveled to places in Punjab and Haryana, because that's where a lot of the boxing and the wrestling stories were coming from, and that those two sports were really picking up after the Beijing Olympics. So I used to go to like Bhatinda and Ludhiana, Bhiwani, all these places very often. But for now, for television crews to just pick up a camera, forget a camera actually, even like a mobile phone, because everyone's shooting on mobiles, to just take a car and go to let's say a village in Punjab, because I want to do a longer story. I want to stay there for 2-3 days, be able to shoot, let's say, an academy, a few athletes, shoot them on the field, off the field. The reporter may not get permission or budget, which is actually a very minimal budget, to just go and cover it. It's actually a very genuine reason why I see a lot of reportage having reduced as drastically as it has. In fact, in television news, most networks, in fact, do not even have a dedicated sports reporting team any longer. All my former colleagues, they are now general news reporters, because they've just had to step into those general reporting shoes as well. So that's one reason I feel for in-depth coverage having gone down, which is what we still see once in a while. We do see, newspapers and websites being able to dedicate some space and time to in-depth reporting. But I it saddens me a lot that in the medium that I worked in, and I was blessed enough to get those opportunities, it's an unthinkable thing at the moment. Yeah.
What's happened post-COVID also, Ananya, has been that you've seen in newspapers, the number of pages have gone down. So you get fewer and fewer stories. There was a little passage of time when ESPN India started out, and we had just great fun because you could just do any like massive long form stories. But you need to have resources, and organization needs to be willing to put those resources into doing that kind of work, and there are not that many organizations that have that kind of almost latitude of thought to say that, yeah, let's do this in a different way. Let's do this in a way that's just beyond, this is this woman athlete and these are her medals. Let's try and find other stories. And at the same time, it's almost like that the women's sports industry has just boomed to a level that it's kind of it's overtaking journalism virtually. You're seeing them in all other sports. They're there doing all kinds of things. Not the convention. It used to just be tennis and women's cricket for a while in the 70s and the 80s. It had a sort of a presence. But then after the 1982 Asian Games, you saw the women's hockey team. And then it's been the boxers and the wrestlers and the Commonwealth Games and so on. So it's almost like that the women have said that we are now ahead of this whole industry that is supposed to be there. And I think particularly interesting for me is how after 2017, the women's cricket sort of explosion has taken place, in the sense of just the fact of notice and attention in papers and on TV and so on, and social media. But the point is, you're watching the parallel, this is India's number one sport, your richest sport, the biggest sport. You're watching the parallel non-acceptance of them being as part of your entire enterprise with the way things are run and managed. So it's still telling you that there is this almost this kind of invisible divide about the women's game and the men's game. Whereas you would have to say that in Olympic sports, you will not have that, because you'll have women's hockey team, men's hockey team, women boxers, male boxers. It's both arms working at the same time. And in cricket, to see that disconnection is very, very bizarre, very strange. It just freaks me out a little bit.
I just want to add one thing, just speaking about the narratives themselves. Yeah, definitely. I think the language has become better, like how the media talks about female sports persons. And this has also been helped in great part by the fact that there are a lot of really young vocal reporters who are girls right now. And I think, what Sharda said a little earlier about her being really quiet in press conferences, I think that's something I felt as well, that I used to be, that a lot of these girls that don't take things lying down. So I think they have started a lot of initiatives within their organizations, given whatever budget constraints. And I think they've really found their voice, and they are the ones leading this, leading how we talk about female sports person, and what we should be talking about, what we shouldn't be saying, how we shouldn't be talking about sports persons. And I think that is happening to an extent, and that is sort of just about starting to help change these narratives that get developed, where there's this, on one hand, there's this need to portray women's sport in a very positive light. So it's always like, oh, there's this woman, she's overcome all of these various things in society and in her family and herself, and there is this sort of need to champion a female sports person. And I think I may have been this may have been a sort of my reporting for a really long period of time, because no one's talking about these people, and you're trying to say, hey, these people are worth talking about. I think that needs to sort of change now, to sort of look at them beyond. I think we tend to put too much on the sports person's shoulders. Every time is like, what does it mean? If you win a World Cup, women's sport is going to change in the country. And that's a lot to be putting on an athlete. There's also this feeling that they should be grateful for what is happening for them. Look, we're giving you an international series after not a year, but just under a year. You had 3 days of this T20 challenge. We're doing so much for women's sport. And you be grateful, don't complain about these things. And I think that narrative is still there, and that also needs to be changed.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me nicely into, these issues of administration and things like that. There are a lot of on-field issues, of course, in terms of pathway structures, facilities at grassroots levels and things like that. But, there are also, looking at the way the game is governed, the support from state and national bodies and things like that. Also the general attitudes of the people in power. How does one change these things? Because on the surface level, they say the right things and, all the right things come out in the media and all that stuff. But in reality, there's actually very little being done. And Sharda, you wrote about this in the magazine itself, the power politics and things like that. How does one actually, change these things?
It's like a saga. I mean, because you're talking fundamentally about changing a power structure in Indian sport. It's not about changing sort of the structures for men's sport or women's sport. It's that basic underlying power structure that is there. That is very old fashioned. That is kitchen table governance kind of a thing that they called. It's not gone on to becoming professionalized. And because the moment it becomes professionalized, you'll be able to see the gaps and you'll be able to fill them in. So this is a very fundamental question of how's it going to, how's that going to happen? How are you going to change the fact that, and I think cricket here should be used as an example across the board, regardless of how well other sports handle their female, competition and their pathways and whatever it is, because cricket is the one that's always held up as, oh, it's the best administered, oh, it's the best run, oh, it's the richest, oh, don't ask it for any, so that's why you have to hold it up to it. And it's almost like cricket is showing you this huge gap and this huge bias in its entirety. It's like spread in front of you and saying, see, this is how unequal it is, and this is how proud we are that it is unequal, and you can't do anything about it. So that is the thing that has to be seen and maybe questioned over and over again. I think it's almost the thing is to keep pointing out and keep poking your finger into people's eyes and say, this is what it is. I don't know if it will change, but the point is just keep poking your finger. That's what you can do, because things move slowly, but you would hope that they would move. We had a lot of because this will be like on a solid rant. The presence of females in higher leadership positions everywhere just makes men very insecure. Makes the men that are there, majority of them, not all men, makes them all insecure. So, and that's where you see playing itself out even in cricket, in cricket administration, everywhere, because that's where the power is, that's where the money is, that's where the clout is. Indian sport is not able to separate, I told you I'm ranting, Indian sport is not able to separate management and policy in that sense. At the start, they'll not do it because it means ceding power. So I stop now at this point before I could go on for 5 hours.
Yeah, the thing about having women in senior positions of governance in sports bodies and in the media, since we're talking about the media as well, I think that is really important. And also, I think a lot of this has to will probably come from sponsors, broadcasters. At least that is my hope, because their money talks, and I think slowly there is an understanding that women's sport can bring in money, and as more and more broadcasters, sponsors, financial consultants, they're going to have to look elsewhere to grow, to find their money, and women's sport is that cash cow, that potential cash cow at some point of time, and I think maybe that is the only thing that will talk at some point.
Yeah, to just picking up from what she mentioned, I feel like, while there are the federations and the associations and the people who sit there and take the amount of time they do take to get things moving, I feel, broadcasters have a very important role. The key broadcasters in India, and they have like a bucket of channels there, but most of the time I see repeats of old IPL matches going on all the time. I watch a lot of kabaddi highlights going on, and that's great. But if you are, wanting to promote this sport, I find it really bizarre that we don't see enough highlights of women's, tournaments.
Oh, yeah. Well, now moving on, I want to talk about sexism, and it kind of feels inevitable when you talk about women's sport, whether you're an athlete, administrator, or in the media, that this is going to be around. And so, one, how have you guys dealt, or have you ever had to deal with sexism, direct comments, or anything online? How have you dealt with those? And, how do you think the media can help changing these attitudes? I know that it's going to take a very long time, but how do we begin the process of changing attitudes in the way female athletes, broadcasters, presenters are seen?
So I think there's sort of a lot of subcategories that you mentioned there, Ananya. I can certainly speak on behalf of the media, and whether I faced sexism myself. So I feel like apart from those rumors or those people speaking in groups saying how would she know what an LBW in cricket is, I feel I did not face anything of the sort, and I think a lot of it is because of the attitude that you go in with. So whenever I used to go out and on an assignment, I used to sort of make it clear that, hello, I am not a fangirl. I am a reporter. I've come here for this story. I will attend this press conference. I will ask the questions that I need and get the answers that I need. I'll go back and file my story. Which also, I remember Sharda earlier in the discussion saying that, I'm taller than most Indian women and I'm not a babe and all of that. I think that's something I did not think on those lines, but I used to be always dressed when going out on an assignment in business clothes. Like I'd be in jeans and a kurta or jeans and a shirt or something like that. I would never be, yeah, sure, I have to do my PTC for television, so I'll quickly put one lip gloss and kajal maybe, but that's about it. When you're in the studio, it's a different story altogether. But when you're going on an assignment on the field, I feel I wanted people to understand that she's not here for a selfie or a photograph on an autograph. She's here to do a story. So I think that kind of helps you, being considered as a serious journalist and someone who means business and is not here for selfies. That sort of, in some sense, you build, I think, that shield around yourself that, hey, I'm not here, for anything but my work. That's one thing. Having said that, I have heard these stories from my colleagues, and I managed to put down a chapter in my book actually about it. My colleagues, who in fact were doing the bulk of the cricket reporting, were women, and I remember them telling me that their male colleagues judge them because of the way they dress. I had a colleague who was reporting on the IPL Slapgate. And there was these meetings that were happening at one of the 5-star hotels, I think in Mumbai, late in the evening or at night. And she managed to speak with one of the officials who was a part of that entire story. And she had to go upstairs to the person's room to get a soundbite or just to get off the record information, which she could probably use for her story. And she did manage to get some important leads and break some important angles in that story. Cannot remember what it was, but I remember her very clearly telling me that, okay, so a female reporter from a television channel has gone up to a male official's room in a 5-star hotel, surely for some reason. And if she has managed to get a cricket exclusive, and you will all agree that exclusive in Indian cricket, getting those stories are very rare. And when one of the girls from the office managed to get an exclusive with the cricketer, is because she's a girl. I've heard these stories. I don't know if that's changed, but even if I did not face these episodes myself, I've heard from my colleagues who I work directly with. So that needs to change. That's I feel for the media. I feel, but I think some way, things are changing. When I was researching for my book also, I remember, because we were talking about broadcast, I remember I spoke with Mandira Bedi and the kind of criticism that she faced when she was doing extra innings, during the 2003 World Cup. And she said, I used to come back to my room and cry because there was no internet back then. And all for my research in the morning, I had to log on to a computer and read articles on Wisden and Cricinfo. Actually, somebody used to give me printouts, but then I used to read online copies of the newspapers back in India. They were calling me the extra in extra innings. And, if there were the male commentators who were a part of the panel in that extra innings show, if they said anything by mistake, it was a slip of tongue. But if I said anything by mistake, then they were ready to burn me. So that was crazy. And I feel a lot of that narrative, some has changed, because even in the broadcast crew, there are a lot more women now. I see them in the production control rooms. I see the floor managers and all. They're all women. But a lot of it also needs to be changed. Like Mayanti is such a fantastic presenter. And I also spoke with her when I was doing the book, and she said, now I really don't care. How does it matter what the height, how high my heels are, or what the hem of my skirt is? How does it matter? I'm there to do a job. I'm sitting in the studio, or I'm on the ground, and I'm there to do a job. I used to get affected by it earlier when people used to really not take into consideration the research that I may have put in, while holding a conversation with these two cricket greats, and I'm hosting a show, and it takes a lot of effort to be doing, live television. You're constantly plugged in. There are 5 people you can hear. It's not easy, and people still continue to talk about what I'm wearing. So I used to get affected. I used to be really depressed, but now I really don't care. So I think a lot of it also about is the attitude that we have, and, while we go ahead with whatever we are. Yeah.
I think when I was in it, there was always this attempt, as the others have said, about trying to minimize the woman side of experiences, like, whether the complaints or whatever. But I think as I've gone along, there's been more, there's things that you see and say, this isn't really okay. Like, and these may be small things, okay? And lots of people may say, just deal with it. But sometimes you shouldn't have to deal with these things. For example, when we're booked for travels, very often end up having to share rooms with a guy. That is not okay. I mean, I don't want to be okay with it. And that's just done again because of budgets or whatever. But no, you put that into your budget that you need separate rooms. You need a cab taking someone from, because these stadiums are somewhere. I think we've all done it. We've all managed to, find company to travel to these stadiums that are 30 kilometers away from the city at 12:30 at night after an IPL game. We've all done that, but we shouldn't have to. Nothing, a lot of these networking things happen at press clubs, around drinks, around cigarettes, which not everyone is able to be part of. And I think these are some lesser, these aren't really big issues if you think about it. Everyone can do their job without really thinking about this. But I'd also like to be in a place where they're okay. You build these systems where these aren't issues, where, you recognize that, okay, this is a problem. Let's not go to press club on some evening. Let's just, I don't know, go to a restaurant, go to a coffee shop or whatever and sit. And let's not always do this after work hours, because people have lives and they should. But, let's see how we can work this within our systems itself.
What Karunya said is quite interesting, because this was very much the culture when I joined in the profession, and it was literally almost like a thing. I said, I don't want to be a part of it because it's not part of my job, and I will not do it. And I remember like Suprita's NDTV organization had a lot of women that were there, her editors and her bosses. The midday where I worked, it was full of very young people and very supportive people. So if you had to get any kind of feedback or anything, you went there. You didn't seek validation from this group of people around you in the press box. That was, and I say this to everybody, that these are the people that are there with you in the press box. You don't have to be their friends. They can be your friends. You will make friends. But to start at the starting point, you don't have to be nice. You don't have to be friends. You just put your head down to your work and go away. And all the issues that she's talking about, the big one used to be toilets. It used to be a massive thing. And people used to complain and say, "Arey, what is this? One woman has come now. We have to make there's no toilet," because guys are just going and peeing at the side of a wall in a stadium. That kind of a thing. So they're all small. You internalize having to make adjustments to your environment around you so much that you have forgotten. My generation has forgotten that, like she's saying, it need not be there. I mean, I'm shocked at what she's saying about having to share, rooms with people. And I remember that when it was never a question that either you sent me on the assignment because I had to go, or you didn't send me on the assignment because I couldn't share a room or all. I didn't care. And the other thing that is there is this thing of, like Suprita saying, "Oh, what do you know? Do you know the techniques of it?" I mean, the thing is that are you here? It was basically to try and undermine the confidence of anyone who's not of that sort of level of great cricket analyst or great cricket reader or whatever it is. A great cricket reader and a great cricket analyst may or may not make a very good journalist, or may not make a very good writer. They're two different skills. So whatever your skills are, that alternative kind of you have to accept that there is this other way. There is not just one way to be a cricket journalist, which is to be male, beer drinking, whatever, press club going. there are thousands of ways to be a good sports journalist. And I think that has coming in because I think the nature of journalism itself has changed in the last, say, 20-25 years. Because of television, you can't just hammer out the same story that everyone has seen on TV. So that has also changed, and it's opened up, I think, the way of it's helped Indian sports journalism, I think, in a huge way, that the narratives and the eyes that look at it have changed as well. You have many more eyes looking at it in many more ways.
So just kind of continuing on this sexism topic, one of the things that kind of adds to the sexualization of female athletes or sports presenters, and I think Suprita mentioned this with Mandira Bedi, is the way that media or broadcasters or advertisers kind of portray them. Because if you look at lots of magazines, you have athletes on the covers, but they don't look like athletes. They're not presented like athletes. And whether it's the clothes they're made to wear, the way they're positioned on camera, things like that, there seems to be this constant, attempt to make women seem desirable, and that's the only way they'll sell. And I've had these conversations with a lot of people over the last couple of years, and they say, yes, there's a space for women who know what they're doing, but you have to make certain compromises, again, in the way you dress, in the way you're willing to come across to the wider world. So I think, Sharda, you wrote about this a few years ago, with reference to the IPL. And with the cheerleaders and of course presenters. And while there are more knowledgeable female presenters in the space now, the prevailing attitudes kind of haven't seemed to have changed. So what can be done about this? Because again, it's the same thing. The power centers are the same. The power centers are those men who are making those decisions. But how as an audience can we potentially force them to change that?
They're all speechless, I think, because you're saying, what you're saying is the fundamental way of, there used to be women's magazines in the 70s and the 80s while growing up, and they used to have a section there that said, if ever you see advertising that is sexist or demeaning women, you please point it out to us. And people would actually send entries in at the time. This is 70s and 80s. And now you look around you and it's in your face in as many ways as possible. It's like they don't even care. And it becomes this whole thing of, for so long, the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue, I just could not get my head around how it was an acceptable thing to do. But it was. With even woke men thinking that it's fine and it's okay, And then, of course, ESPN invented the body and all those other kind of things. That there'll always be, it's almost like a male gaze. So the moment you change the gaze and you say it's a gaze of men and women together, it's a gaze of everybody, then you can have a different understanding as to how things are done. What Suprita is saying about professional clothing is, it's it's almost like you internalize it and you just do it all the time without thinking. And guys don't think. There are guys who wear chappals and shorts and they go into a cricket match. But catch us wearing chappals and shorts and going into a cricket match.
Yeah, I think it is about having more women talking about sports in general and making those decisions about what aspects of women's sport to talk about. It just, as Sharda said, just getting more female gazes in there. I think as an audience itself, I think it's asking a little much. It just requires a little more responsibility from publishers, broadcasters to do it. Because I think they do it knowing that they know that they're exposing a lot of their presenters to a lot of undesirable comments as well. And that is ignored, and that's not okay. So it's like, very well what you're getting by putting a presenter who's dressed in a certain way, talking to a cricketer on a field in heels. You know how the audience is going to respond to that, and you're doing it for that very reason. And I think that does have to change. Even if it's like by digital, it's maybe a little easier because you can police comments it's not enough to say, okay, this video got 1 million views. If you know that out of those 1,700,000 have said, will you please marry me, or I love this woman, that is not a successful media product. And that decision is something that needs to be taken by media houses.
Well, one last question around this topic. Karuna, you mentioned broadcasters or editors need to kind of make these decisions or take these stands, but a lot of the decisions are based around number of views, whether this content is going to get us clicks or things like that, and because that's the only way they're going to make money. So, and when you're looking at these, there are lots of really small organizations that depend on these clicks. So, how do you force them, or how do you get them to kind of shift away from that? How do you change the narrative? Because again, this is like Sharda mentioned earlier, a lot of newspapers didn't cover women's sports because of space constraints or things like that. And, whether you want to put your resources into covering maybe more important stories, but stories that probably won't get as many clicks. So how do you kind of prioritize these things? Because they're very difficult decisions at the end of the day.
I guess that's where a good management team comes into place. It is a competitive industry where a lot of people are fighting for a small share of the pie, but media is constantly changing and evolving. The different tools that everyone has, and I think that these are answers that everyone is looking for. How do we make money out of good content, good reporting, and how do we fund that? Some people have found successful ways. Even something like your magazine is something that is doing the job in going a little in depth into stories, in talking about a lot of these issues, and presenting athletes in a way that they're not normally done, giving that space. So I suppose it's a lot of really small initiatives. On a larger level, since a lot of this right now, I suppose, happens on social media, on digital channels, a lot of the negativity is probably through that right now. A lot of the negativity finds voice through that right now. I think there have been some small, there has been a lot of pressure on digital channels, on social networks to make these changes, to come up with better ways to, so that women can deal with trolling, where you can sort of report these comments that aren't very nice. And at some level, it is going to be a call where managements do take that call and say that, maybe we're going to lose some money, maybe we're going to lose some clicks, but it's still the right thing to do. And unless you look at it from that angle, the conversation will continue to be a little unpleasant.
So let's end on a slightly lighter note. All three of you have interacted with a range of people involved in women's sport. Can you each share maybe an interaction that kind of stood out to you or that stuck with you over the years with either an athlete, administrator, or anyone involved in women's sport? Start with Sharda, maybe.
I had a great interaction with Elise Norman. She was the head of the Northern, I think it was Northerns Cricket, which is the people that run the cricket in Pretoria, the Centurion ground. And she was the lady in charge of the India-Pakistan match that was going to happen in 2003. And for me, the first absolute joy was saying, okay, you can meet the CEO. She was CEO, I think, at the time. So I said, okay, where is she? Because I was in India today, so you have to file little bits of information about it. And I said, okay, where's the CEO? They said, okay, that's the office. So I walked in and there was a woman sitting there. And I just wanted to shriek in joy. I was just so delighted. And then we chatted. So once we finished talking about the work, then we chatted about other things, and she said, she told me a lot of funny stories. She told me a lot of stories in her interactions with the police, in their interactions with players, with officials who were officious. Unfortunately, she passed away very early, but she was a completely, absolutely refreshing sort of breath of fresh air in the middle of all these cricket officials going around and everything. And she ran the show perfectly. That whole match, everyone remembers it here in India. It was just a complete blast. It was just great. I remember that. I also remember having great fun conversations with Anjum Chopra almost all the time, every time we talk. So that's also included.
So firstly, I want to say that I'm really, really happy to be a part of this gang talking women's sport. I'll tell you why. Because for the last 2 seasons, I've been working in the IPL where I have no women colleagues. The last IPL was a particularly challenging experience for me because for 85 days, I was in a biosecure bubble with 55 men. And I was most delighted when Ravi Ashwin's wife and Ajinkya Rahane's wife came and became a part of the bubble, and they were to accompany their husbands to Australia. And I think I told one of them that I am happier to see you than your husband probably is, because I really could do with some female company. So when those two came along with the babies and the kids, they're all girls, Rahane's daughter and Ashwin's 2 daughters. So I used to just go to the table and just sit with the mommies and the babies and not get up from that table. Totally digressing, but I wanted to make this point that it's been super enjoyable and fun just being able to talk. Speaking of memorable interactions, again, super difficult. I can't really zero in. But I think one of my most fun conversations was with MC Mary Kom, which was actually the first time I was meeting her, which was in 2008. I think she had come back with one of her World Championship titles and she was being felicitated at Delhi University. My editor just told me she's being felicitated, and nobody till then really knew what a big deal it was to be a multiple time, champion, world champion. And this was, I think, after one of her deliveries. I can't remember very clearly, but I remember the conversation and the interview. Like, we were rolling, and she was really upset because she had won probably her 3rd or 4th world title, and she did not get the Rajiv Gandhi Khel Ratna that year. It had gone to MS Dhoni. Okay, and she was really upset, and on camera she kept saying, "Mujhe nahi diya Khel Ratna, Dhoni Singh ko de diya, ye galat hai." In my head, I'm thinking, okay, I've got my headline. Thank you so much. And then we turned off the cameras, and then she just sat down on the grass, on the Delhi University grounds, and she was just chatting normally with me. And then she said, "Interview theek tha?" I said, "Ha, ma'am, बहुत अच्छा था." And then she said, "मैं ठीक, did I say everything okay?" I said, "Yes, you did." And then later she realized that she called MS Dhoni Dhoni Singh, and she was like, "गलत हो गया, अब फिर से recording करना है?" I said, "No, it's fine." And after that, there were just so many conversations we had, and like, over the years, every interview that I've had with Mary have been like super fun and enjoyable because she's amazing. But another experience that I'll never forget was from 2015 when Martina Navratilova had come down to India for an event at Sania's tennis academy in Hyderabad. And I think Sania had won the title, the doubles title at Wimbledon that year with Hingis. I was super nervous before that interview because it was Navratilova. I mean, I knew I had done my homework, I had done all my research, and I was told by the officials from WTA that you're not going to get 1 second more than 5 minutes. So I sort of like timed myself, I'll ask priority wise question number 1, 2, 3, 4. But I had this big question in my mind: will I be able to ask her anything apart from, this visit to Sania's academy? Can I ask her things like what does she think about gay athletes, why it's important for her to talk about these, all the issues that she chooses to talk about. I was super nervous because, I don't know, I went into that room and it was quite intimidating. And then before we sort of started recording the interview, I asked her, I called her ma'am. Yeah, I called her ma'am, and I said, "Is it okay if would you be okay to talk about," I don't know, I was stuttering and all of that. I said, "Would you be okay to talk about gay athletes, gay rights?" And she was like, "Of course, let's roll," and then we started. And then the 5-minute interview became like a 17-minute interview. She spoke about everything. It was amazing. I was like, I have got like the biggest exclusive of my life. I will never forget that experience. And then we stopped and she said, "Are you happy?" I said, "I'm super happy." And then she started talking about dal and bhindi fry, which she always eats whenever she comes to India. So I will never forget that experience. It was amazing. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I think I could listen to 3 of you talk all day. Just one last thing. I'm going to ask you to put on your mentor hats or whatever. And maybe any advice that you'd give to young women wanting to get into the field of sports journalism. Let's start with Sukrita first.
I thought we were going to start with Sharda. I'm going to use the time to think of some important things. No, honestly, I think, I understand that the media space is very different right now. There are a lot of restrictions, but like we've, I think, established quite well through the course of this conversation is that everything's happening on digital. And while there are a lot of people who don't tend to take digital seriously, like Karunya mentioned, they think, oh, it's a story on digital means you've put together, 5 tweets and sort of managed like a 400-word article or whatever. But I think that's also the most powerful medium for you to use if you can use it correctly. I feel like if there's a story that really appeals to you, just go for it. Just pitch it as well as you can to your editor, and there will always be hurdles. You will be told that, sorry, I don't have the budget for a photographer or a camera person. But I think because this space is such that you have to work a little harder on sort of picking up a few more skills, I feel, and updating yourselves. So it's not good enough, unfortunately, if you are a person who has like the greatest nose for news or the person who writes the most amazing stories. I feel it's important to pick up important skills to stay relevant. So, do like a crash course in on photography, maybe just hang out on weekends with friends who work on the camera, pick up a few skills, try and sit with an editing software when you have time, and pick up some skills so that you can put a basic edit together and you can tell your editor, you know what, please give me the permission and go and shoot this series because I am going to do all of it myself. I don't need a budget. I'm going to go there. I will write the story. I will voice it. I will shoot it. I will edit it and have it ready for you. So I think it's important for the modern day journalist to be able to, equip herself with all these skills and not just be able to write or tell a story well enough.
I think there's a tendency for a lot of younger people coming into the job, even older people actually, to internalize a lot of things that they think they can't do. So, loads of people say, oh, I can't write so well. I can't speak on camera. I don't like the sound of my voice. I think everyone has fears like that. It's completely fine to pretend that it's all okay and just go for it because you will get better. It's also as important to ask for help in areas where you really can't do things that well. You don't have to do everything yourself. It's important to be willing to help others, to help your colleagues, because at some point you're going to need to lean on them. Including feedback on writing, on pieces, including perspectives, all of that, I think, and just maybe amplifying voices if you can. If you're in a position to sort of showcase what someone else has done, you should definitely do that because the favor will be returned at some point.
This is for all young women journalists or all journalists, or what is the...
I said young women wanting to become sports journalists.
Because Suprita and Karunya have covered everything. Just a standard basic advice. Standard. Don't seek validation from the boys club. Don't try to be like the boys. Just be yourself.
Good advice for everybody.
I think that's perfect. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. I mean, I had a great time chatting with all of you, and I mean, I've looked up to all of you at different points. I still look up to all of you and kind of seek inspiration from your work. So for me, I don't think I could have been more thrilled. So thanks again for all your time.
Thank you. It was great fun.
Thank you so much. It was super fun. Thank you.
Great fun to be here.